Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm John Yarrington, CEO of the Performance Driven Marketing Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to yet another exciting and fun-filled episode of the PDMI Take 20. It's a quick-hitting roundtable discussion led by industry experts on trending topics, all in 20 minutes or less. And the PDMI, as a reminder, is a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to protecting, promoting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and the direct response advertising industries. Now, before we get started, I'd like to go through a little bit of housekeeping. If you're watching today with us live in the audience and you want to ask a question, we'd love to have you do so. However, to do so, please use the questions tab located in the control panel to ask your question. Now, a couple of notes here. You're welcome to ask your questions throughout the session that we're having today. However, we will not be answering any of those questions until the end of the conversation. So now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our fabulous moderator, the fearless Chris Foster. Chris, aka Johnny Fever, when he puts that headset on, he really rocks it. Chris is the Senior Vice President of Modern Postcard New Business Development. He is working for a direct marketing agency down in Carlsbad, California. And when he's not doing his day job, he also teaches brand strategies at UCS Extension courses. He is the chairman of the PDMI Brand Response Council and an all-around fantastic guy. Chris, I'm going to pass you the magic mic, and you can go ahead and run with the panel.
Thanks so much, John. Thanks for having me, and so glad to see all of you today with these Take 20 episodes. We're trying to keep it very topical. We're trying to change it up so that new ideas are presented each time. And I don't know if you know this, but there is an election coming up. You might have heard of it, the big 2020 elections. They're kind of a thing here in the States. So yeah, you can't get away from them, right? And so what we wanted to talk about was election marketing and how the brands, find themselves as a political entity. How do they market themselves? How do they get in front of their audiences? And the way the technologies are changing, it's been completely different. There's been a clear and pronounced shift. I mean, like you said, I'm Johnny Fever from Cincinnati and WKRP, and I'm old enough to know who that is. And so I'm old enough to see the transition when the only way that they could do political ads was on the network TVs or direct mail or billboards or radio. And so clearly, though, there's been a shift, especially from mailing in or door knocking into the digital space, into connected television. And the unique and 2 and 4 year cycles of elections means that these technology waves can come in. And every election comes through with this wave either mature or just starting. And so the question is, how do political campaigns take advantage of these mature waves or just emerging waves of technology? How do they reach their audiences? How do you balance the national versus the local? How do you balance the swing states? So that's what we're really going to talk about. We're joined by Mark Sullivan, Heather Molina, coast to coast. We've got reps from representing Hoboken, New Jersey, all the way to Tucson, Arizona. So thanks so much for joining us. And Mark, I think that I'd like to start with you, if you could.
Sure.
Knowing that the technology has changed, there's social, there's digital, there's connected TV, and the question is, where's the spend go to? How are you seeing the spend differently this election cycle?
Well, first off, Chris, the election cycle really started. We were starting to see dollars come in last fourth quarter with the primaries getting going.
Okay.
On Republican, the Democratic primary. So we initially saw some dollars come in. I think it was late November, December into January, February for the primaries. Pre-COVID, mostly linear dollars at the time. And then we've seen a large. So that's the past 9 months, right? But if I were to go back to 2016 or even 2012, my background is I've been at ViacomCBS for 15 years, national cable, mostly for the first 12 years at least linear, and a lot more digital video the past 3 to 4 years. But 2000. Let's go back to 2008, right? I don't remember seeing any linear dollars coming in. 2012, maybe a little bit on the Obama side, 2008, and then 2012. Then 2016, we started seeing probably a pretty large uptick on the linear side for some presidential, the presidential election in 2016. And obviously, I know I didn't experience it, but there's a huge, obviously, huge social and online digital push for that election as well. I think everything you'll read, everything I've read the last few months, and also just experience within the marketplace and the industry, is there's been a huge push to connected TV. So we're still seeing linear budgets coming in for the presidential election, because that's national cable, right? So we're seeing linear dollars there, but on the connected TV side, across our platforms, and from what I can tell across the industry connected TV platforms, there are budgets coming in on a weekly, sometimes daily basis, depending on how the candidates are buying across connected TV, in terms of maybe 6 to 10 swing states are seeing a large uptick in dollars, and then also break it down to even the Senate, the battle for the Senate, right, where you're seeing individual races that are very tight in certain parts of the country. So I think from again being in the industry for a long time, the elections, I think this election cycle is going to see the largest increase of political dollars, and I'm sure 4 years from now it'll go even higher. But just about 2020, it's been, so we're still seeing a linear national cable dollars, national cable budgets, but there's been a huge influx on the targeted connected TV side that wasn't there 4 years ago.
Interesting. So Heather, I got to ask you then, from a targeted standpoint, how then do you start seeing some of those adjustments to make to connect a certain message to a specific audience, and the data that's used for that kind of translation, that kind of connection?
Well, I think, the most important role for each of these campaigns, or any political campaign, one of the most important roles within their organization is going to be that chief digital officer, that chief media officer role that you've seen get more prominence in the past 2 years, to the point where you're seeing some of the chief media officers for like Hillary Clinton's campaign talking on national TV about this campaign and stuff. They're very prominent roles, and they're so critical and so important. That influx of data and being able to target precisely and do that more refined targeting within connected TV is so greatly important. On the digital side, from an inventory, from a strategy perspective, you're seeing, well, first off, they're estimating that we're going to see about $7 billion in political spend in this election cycle, and the majority of it is going to be happening between like now and election day, from what I understand. That's just sort of what we've read online and stuff. And when you break it down based off of some of the resources you have online with making the public spend, or the digital spend public and stuff, as to where each of these campaigns, specifically speaking to the presidential one, Trump is pumping a lot of money into Facebook, a little less into Google, and then Biden is he's pumping more into the Facebook, Instagram platform, but his Google platform is strong compared to how much he's spent in total so far to date. And so I think the reason that is because people are researching Biden, they're wanting to know about him, they're Googling him, they're Googling Democratic candidates and stuff like that. So you're seeing them dedicate spend to Google to really capture people, but also that Google spend also, what I'm understanding, reflects any kind of digital spend in video and everything else across the Google universe of platforms and advertising that they have and stuff. So you're seeing Trump go all in on Facebook, and he's targeting older generations, from what you can tell based on the targeting data that they have. So when I say older generations, I'm talking, basically 45 plus. So people 45 plus, whereas Biden seems to be targeting on Facebook people between the ages of 25 and 44. So he's going for that younger audience on those platforms, and really zeroing in on that. So I think that, in terms of strategy, in terms of how dollars are breaking out, they're all changing on a day-to-day basis. 2020 playbook for regular brands has completely changed, which we've talked about in the past on the Take 20 and other panel conferences, but more so with the election coverage and how things are rolling out. It's a day-by-day thing. And, you know, being in a swing state, I live in Arizona, I'm seeing both president, every news block, every commercial block on, you know, MSNBC or, you know, CNN or Fox News, whatever I happen to be watching at the moment, there will always be at least two political commercials within that block. Sometimes it's two presidential, sometimes it's the two Senate races between Mark Kelly and Martha McSally, because that is a tight race here too, or not a tight race so much, but a very controversial race that everyone is watching, especially now given the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and stuff.
Right.
They're really zeroing in on that special election from a Senate perspective here in Arizona, and so that data is so critical. Understanding how people are reacting to your ads, feeding that into the process, feeding that into your process for strategy, to what steps you take next from a remarketing perspective, to being able to dial in and target this person across video or TV or someplace else. Those retargeting capabilities and strategy is so important, and it's really getting used. And that's where a lot of money I see going in the next couple of weeks, is really just zeroing in and not having having as little wasted ad spend as possible, leveraging what we're seeing people do on one platform and trying to segment it and connect it to somebody. You know, if we can tell if they're watching TV, if we caught them on Facebook and message to them, and we can see through their viewing habits that they're going someplace else that's connected and it's in video, we're going to serve an ad to them right there and stuff. So it's hyper targeted. And there's going to be a lot of money that's going to be dumped into this over the next like 4 to 5 weeks.
So that's hard to reach young influential voters, right? That's what they're targeting. I read some comments today from getting ready for this call from both Republican and Democratic strategists, and they estimate that 15 to 20% of the country, hasn't made up their mind. So 80% of the country has made up their mind about who they want to vote. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the strategists said it's in terms of, from a marketing perspective, it's one of the only products that you pour all this money into after 80% has decided that they've already decided. They're only trying to influence 15 to 20% and the amount of money. And they also were saying that, to what Heather had kind of just alluded to, that September is the new October, whereas a ton of money would pour in the past, you know, as you build up the last 3 or 4 weeks. That money's pouring in now for a variety of reasons, but because they can talk, you know, early voting, mail-in voting, you know, a lot of COVID related and whatnot, that they, you know, if somebody is getting a mail-in ballot, they want to make sure they're hitting them before they're mailing it back, right? So the
that's
amount of money
what I
pouring
think.
in,
So well, and it's funny because Mark, you and Heather both talk about, I almost think of it visually like a funnel, right? You said that there's about $7 billion at play yet to be spent. Last I checked, there's probably about 7 weeks left of the election. That's almost $1 billion a week getting pushed in. And if that is narrowed down to the 15 to 20% of people who haven't made their mind up, it's almost like this huge funnel of cash that's being squeezed into these various channels. And so, you know, you touched on it briefly, Mark. So I think that's fascinating. And you touched on briefly about the mail-in and a little bit of COVID. The available inventory that's out there, I'm sure, is a roller coaster. I'm sure it goes up and down. How do you help to normalize or adjust spend based on constantly changing inventory? And Heather, like you'd mentioned, and Mark, you mentioned too, we're changing our spend this week because this is what we've learned this week. So now we're going to make an adjustments. How do you manage that?
That is challenging. Luckily, that's not necessarily for me to decide, but internally. But you know, we our group, the group I represent within Viacom, we don't specifically sell to political ourselves, so we're internally trying to get that inventory as well. And you know, it is challenging, especially right now. But with the broadcast quarter, the new broadcast quarter on linear starting on Monday. You know, it's a slightly different linear slightly different on linear avail side for October at the moment. I think from a national cable perspective, the avails will be there for the political dollars that come in, that'll be coming in. They make room. Essentially, they make room for them. They're going to make room for those political dollars.
Got it. Okay.
On the linear side, on the connected TV side, I think the same holds true. There's a lot more impressions in the marketplace now on the connected TV side than there were pre-COVID. I mean, there was a lot then too, but given what's gone on in the marketplace the last 6 months, there's a ton of impressions there. And again, they're targeting, from a targeting perspective, I think 80% of the households in the United States have connected TV. And you're gonna hit those young, influential, hard to reach voters. So not only, and I just want to touch on one more point with that, it's not just from a candidate perspective putting dollars down. We also have super PACs coming in. Vote, get out to vote, voting rights. I'm sure there'll be some Supreme Court PAC dollars coming in across the marketplace. As of right now, I have not heard that, but I'm sure that's in development. I'm sure that's coming. So.
Well, yeah, I was listening. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, you're perfect. I was just going to say from an outsider's perspective, it feels like a mad scramble, right? How do you then rush in with your dollars and your message and your channel and squeeze this in a handful of weeks to the people? And it seems like a really interesting and frenetic time for the people actually making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, first off, between the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Friday night to, I think, Sunday morning, there was that news story where I think 72 million had come into the Democratic candidate party election from money raised. So that certainly shows you the mind of some of these voters or some of these supporters of that political party, and that they understand what's needed to get them through this next push of the next few weeks until election day. So there's definitely that money that has come in, and I think that's going to continue, especially as we start to go down this path of the Supreme Court justice topic and everything else. Is going to get even more aggressive. But in my mind, if I am the chief digital officer of any of these political campaigns, I have in my mind, or I am always with my team, reevaluating what the priority is from a media spend perspective. Which channels do I need to dial up? How do I connect into them? How do I get them executed quickly? How do I execute the right messaging and creative? Because that's a whole another component. There are endless, especially when it comes to digital, there are endless venues for these political parties to push their ad dollars into. There's numerous platforms and stuff. It's not just the Facebook, Googles, the linear TVs, anything offline and stuff. There are endless things. They could do content marketing. They could do all these other things. They just have to be able to react quickly, create the content and the message that they need, and get it pushed out as quickly as possible. So they need to be producing this content on the fly, quickly. And the messaging can change from a day's notice. So they really have to have this before they go into these election seasons, really have to have it well dialed in, what the strategy is going to be able to get these things done in real time, on the fly, thinking in that whole digital newsroom or connected newsroom perspective. We can see this happening in social listening and through the actions of what people are doing. Therefore, we're going to tailor our message, and we're going to get this out by the end of today or by lunchtime today on paid search, on maybe some of the connected, content marketing. Yeah, that's how quickly it has to. These campaigns have to be able to dial in their message or change their message around and stuff to really leverage any hole or gap in their opponent's, step. If Biden says something crazy one day, Trump's going to have it later that day or the next morning in an ad and be pushing it out. Same with Biden. They're now starting to take that same route of using, whatever's been put out there and dialing it in really, really fast and stuff. And so they're getting smarter and faster, and they've got a process from everything, which channels are priority to dial in, and the process for how to create this content to push out the messaging that's appropriate for that specific channel.
It's interesting. It's almost as if the general marketing trends are supercharged or put on steroids or electrified so that it's smarter and faster than almost any other market space that's in there that I can see. And it's, I guess we're going to be wrapping up really quickly, and I just wanted to ask, you know, with that in mind, it's kind of like this arms and brains race, right? This technical arms and, you know, digital arms race with the money that they've got, the media they're pouring out, and the smarts of the team, right? Right? How you actually move that quickly. This has been a fantastic conversation, and we're at about 20 minutes. So I'm just going to ask you, Mark. Imagine it's December 15th. What do you think we would have learned? A big lesson from this previous election cycle.
The current election cycle we're in?
What's your big lesson?
Good question. You know, I think you can only compare it to, in my opinion, you have to compare it to 4 years ago and do a side-by-side analysis of the most recent election to see where the dollars fully lay out when we get to, you know, when those numbers are available, and compare them back to 2016 to see the effect. I mean, obviously, you know, we should have a president by then. Hopefully, it's not like the year 2000 when it was all the way back. You know, I think brand safety is something I didn't mention yet to this point. That linear connected TV brand safe content provide. And I would love to see, I think when we get to December 15th, then we can do, you know, an autopsy in some ways on this election, again, versus 2016. How much money went to brand safe content, you know, in the linear connected TV space, the budgeted dollars versus, I know Heather mentioned $7 billion. I did see that number somewhere. And how does that compare back to the last election cycle? And then what are these strategists? There's clearly an absolute ton of money that's being spent. Honestly, like all politics aside, I can't even understand how much that's a whole other discussion. But you know, if we're looking at, you know, how with the effect of what was the effect of those dollars? You know, and I think brand safety is going to play a huge role this time around. Whereas 2016, I don't recall that even being a topic.
Interesting.
Wrong,
I like it.
But that's my opinion. Yeah.
Heather, what do you think we will have learned?
Well, we'll have learned whether or not these strategies obviously have worked, as Mark said, you know, taking a, you know, not just a side-by-side of 2016 to 2020 and how it all played out, but I think what we're going to see, which will be really interesting, because you started to see it, I think, coming out of the last election, is really some of these digital channels, and I'm thinking Facebook in particular, and their impact and ability to carry the conversation both from a, you know, free content perspective, as well as from an advertising perspective. You're going to see, based on how everything unfolds, if it's pure chaos, and you're going to have people in the industry or people out there in the public saying, you know, Facebook, you are a news organization. It's time that you start to be treated like one and be held to the same accountabilities and stuff. You could see that conversation come back into play because, and I'm just saying that based on where we're seeing dollars to date be spent, especially in digital. So I think you're going to see some conversations probably around Facebook and its ability to influence and impact and hold accountable the right messages and whether or not things are accurate and stuff. And you know, yes to all that brand safety stuff that Mark just talked about, because I know that from, you know, a non-political brand management perspective, you know, we really are taking from our clients' perspective, putting them in brand safe messaging opportunities, especially when it comes to programmatic and video. So, you know, not allowing their ads to be shown on certain types of sites, political sites, things against political content on news sites and stuff like that, so that you as a brand are not seen necessarily as supporting one candidate or the other. But there are also some brands out there that, like, you know, thinking of a Patagonia and the tags that they had sewn into some of their clothing where they were taking a political stand, and I'm sure they don't mind it and stuff. So I think that the brand safety conversation will come up, but I also think just sort of how this all unfolds, who wins, and taking a look at their spend, especially from an online perspective, and whether or not Facebook and, you know, and Instagram and Google, how they impacted the audiences that each candidate seems to be targeting, which again, for Trump, seems to be that 45 plus audience. And for Biden, based on the spend and the targeting, it's that 25 to 44 market that that campaign seems to be going after. And we'll see if it all worked.
Right, that's the big key. I think it's fascinating. And one stat that I did see about Generation Z is that 65% of Generation Zs are more likely to support a brand that aligns with their values and causes that they believe in any side. So I think that that topic of brand safety is going to be interesting because some brands are going to choose to engage, some brands are going to want to be a distant, and it depends on what their audience looks like. This was wonderful, you guys. I really appreciate the in-depth. We could stay here all day, and I'm curious to see how this is going to wrap up. Right, like you said, we've got X number of weeks until game time. So we'll see how influential these ads have been, how the targeting works, and I'm also curious how it shapes the next stage for the evolution 2 years and 4 years from now, right? It's almost like a new level set platform where 4 years from now, there's building off the base what they're creating now. So thank you for that conversation. John, it looks like you popped in, so I think you're putting the hook.
You know, we've hit our 20. It's time to wrap, but I want to say, Heather, Mark, Chris, what a fabulous, meaningful, compelling, and valuable conversation. I've been in the industry for 2 decades. I've seen a lot of elections come and go, and no doubt about it, this one's the most confusing, wild, interesting one ever in my career. And you guys shed a lot of light on it today, so thank you so much. Folks, I hope you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I'd like to invite you to join our next Take 20 episode, hosted on Wednesday, October 7th, at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll be talking about the gravity and trajectory of e-commerce. So really fun stuff. It should be a really great panel. Again, many thanks to you, Mark, and Heather, and Chris for doing this one today. Look forward to working with you guys in the future. For those in the audience and those watching at home, if you want to check out the Take 20 schedule for the weeks to come, we're scheduled out for many months to come. Check thepdmi.com/take-20, thepdmi.com/take-20. Thanks again, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a lovely day, and make sure you go out and vote.